Hello and welcome to another episode of the Uncommon Energy podcast. This week on the cast, we'll be talking about the upcoming Warsaw Regional Championships happening this weekend in Poland. We'll also talk about the recent announcement of the Crown Zenith special set. We'll, of course, have everyone's favorite segment, Guess That Flavor Text. And as we are just a few days away from Silver Tempest releasing on PTCGO and PTCG Live, we're going to cover some of the most interesting cards in the set, give our opinions on them, a little bit of a mini set review. We're going to leave out most of the cards, but talk about some of our favorite ones. I am Chip Ritchie, joined here by my co-host, Azul GG. What's up, Azul? How's it going, man?
Doing pretty good, Chip. Doing pretty good. Been trying to make a commitment to not rant about PTCG Live over the last couple of weeks and
You're
going
swearing
forward.
it off.
Yeah, just gonna let it rest and just like kind of see what happens. I mean, I feel like I've said everything I need to say at this point. So not just on the podcast, but like on my streams or whatever, in general, Twitter. So yeah, just been.
People are tired of hearing you talk about it, rant about it.
I mean, a little bit, I'm sure. Some people still enjoy the rant. So it's something there's like new topics come up. Like Robin put out a tweet today, kind of talking about the whole like kind of economy of the game and how it's not probably going to last in its current form because like it almost feels like the only way to get real value on the game to be able to constantly build top decks is to do the 400 celebrations codes, like buy 400 celebrations codes, and they're basically sold out everywhere since the announcement of the beta going global by the end of the month. So without that, it seems like it is pretty hard to sustain your credits to be able to build whatever deck you want with new set releases. So yeah, I mean, there's always new and more stuff to complain about or talk about, but I'm gonna try and limit it. Just I feel like they've got all the input that I could ever give them, and if they have listened to the podcast or listened to my rants, then they'll know what I care about. But Chip, how was your week? Did you do any rants about PTCG Live?
No ranting from me, just kind of existing, I guess. Not not really much going on actually. I went down this weekend to my parents' beach place with my dad and brother, and we did some like it's the end of like the rental season. They have like a vacation home that they rent out during the
Hmm.
summer and stuff, and so we went down and did some projects, fixed some stuff up, so that was good. I also this week updated my Twitter handle and like YouTube username and all that stuff. I decided to go away from the Trainer Chip name that I've used for the last few years and changed my handle to just be at Chip Ritchie. So no more Trainer Chip. Unfortunately, Trainer Chip is dead and gone. I'm just Chip Ritchie now. But yeah, I just decided to do that because I got some kind of funny replies on my Twitter when I was talking about it. Some people were like, "I miss Trainer Chip already" and stuff like that. But um, yeah, I just decided to update it just to I don't know. I think like having the name Trainer Chip just kind of felt like it shoehorned me into like just talking and doing Pokemon stuff, and I don't necessarily just want to do that. I kind of just want to, have opportunities to, when I make content or when I'm doing like casting or anything like that, just have chances to kind of be outside of that sphere. So just went with my name, which seems like a good place to go. You kind of have the benefit of having your name just be like a cool gamer name anyway. So, it's
Yeah.
kind of a cheat code, honestly. Azul Garcia Griego, Azul GG, but
Yeah, you're afraid of like someone like seeing that you cast, but then they see Trainer Chip. You're gonna be like, oh, they can only cast Pokemon. There's no way they could
yeah, I
cast
don't know, man.
Valorant or something.
I've
No,
never,
I think it is a
to be honest, I've like never been that big of a fan of the name Trainer Chip. But for some reason, when I made a YouTube channel 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I guess, like that's just the name I went with. And,
yeah.
I decided nothing's holding me down to it. I'm cutting ties with Trainer Chip. I'm just Chip Ritchie.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense. I think it makes a good sense as far as like a professional move or whatever you want to call it. It's a good business move.
A good business move, making moves, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump right into the episode this week, and we're going to talk, starting off, about the Warsaw Regional Championships taking place in Poland this weekend. This will be the last tournament of the Lost Origin format. Of course, Silver Tempest, like we mentioned at the start, will be releasing on PTCG Live and PTCGO this week. And the next big tournament is going to be the Latin American International Championships, for which Silver Tempest will be legal. So the meta is going to get shifted a bunch. There's going to be a big shakeup without a doubt. Last chance for some of these decks in this current format, the current meta. So we'll talk about what we think is going to do well in Warsaw, and it's going to be mostly Europeans at the event, obviously, since it's a European regional. But I've actually seen on Twitter there's like a decent amount of American players, some players from other parts of the world, I'm sure as well, going to this event. So might make for a little bit more of an international feel than usual at these European regionals. I guess most of their regionals are pretty international because there's a bunch of countries there in Europe, but yeah, the last tournament in this format, Azul, you got any kind of big thoughts heading into the weekend? Anything that you think could surprise us? Or are we going to see a little bit more of the same?
I think probably just continue to see more of the same. I can't imagine why anyone would or why a big shift would happen now. We've kind of had like the same meta for the last 3, 4 major tournaments. We didn't really get a meta breakdown for the regional tournaments in Indonesia and Malaysia, and they definitely had some different results as far as their top eights went. But I would be curious to have seen like what the overall meta kind of looks
Yeah,
like
yeah.
for sure. But yeah, Giratina and Kyurem have been the top two, and even though I don't think Kyurem is super deserving of the play that it has been getting, even since its initial release tournament in Peoria, we did see it have like a um, pretty big showing in Indonesia. So maybe it is deserving of. I don't know. I've never been a huge fan of the Kyurem deck, but even when I like talk to other top players in the game, that some of them do seem to be fans of the deck, even if they haven't brought it themselves to some of the tournaments. They do enjoy it. So I think probably. I mean, I don't see any reason for anything. I think Kyurem Giratina will be the top two, and then you'll kind of have that mix of the next 3 to 4 decks. You'll have the Mew, the Sablezard, and I'm missing one. Palkia,
Yeah,
Palkia and
yeah.
Teleon will be the next like 3. But where they land doesn't really matter, and I don't really have a prediction for how popular each of those will be. Although I guess maybe it'd be safe to predict Palkia will probably get more popular.
What makes you think Palkia will get more popular? Just kind of people at the end of the format wanting to go back to something that they know well. Like, I mean, the deck I don't think has really changed as far as how powerful it is.
Yeah, but I think it has been gaining popularity. I think it's just like people are like when the set initially releases, people wanted to play new and different stuff, and there's a little bit more unsure of what is the best deck or what are the best decks. But I think pretty much everyone respects Palkia to be the best overall deck in the format still, which I still think it is. And I think that will just have more people gradually gravitating back towards it. They try their Giratina or their Sablezard or their Kyurem deck, and they don't do as well with it. And it's like, all right, I'm gonna go back to the Palkia, and like I know I can probably get more consistent, better results out of that. Overall, and we still see like a lot of the best players in the world still continuing to bring the Palkia and Teleon as well. I don't expect them to change either, unless they come up with something new, truly like new and broken, maybe, which would be cool to see for sure.
It would be cool, but I mean, I feel like these tournaments at the end of the format is when we're the least likely to see that stuff pop up, right? Because, um, I mean, I guess the meta is a little more defined, so
Yeah,
sometimes someone will try to take advantage of that, but usually people just kind of know what they like in a format by this point, and
yeah,
oftentimes you'll see players kind of stick to a specific deck in a format. Like you with Regis, this format, I guess, could be an example. It just always felt like the best play, and so you just made little changes to the list for the meta. I think we
yeah,
see that pretty often from a lot of players.
yeah. I think some metas that's true. Like this meta, I think it's like yeah, the meta is always going to get more defined the longer it is a meta or a format. The meta and the format's going to get more defined the longer a format exists. Um, but for this kind of format, it is kind of like too open, right? Like I feel like you have too many powerful decks that can do too many things, like namely Kyurem, Giratina, and Palkia. They're just like they can beat so many things. It's hard to like want to take a loss to any of those to try and beat the other two. The one kind of deck though that can always kind of take advantage of a format becoming more stable is control. So we did see a couple Mewtwo v Union control style decks in day 2 of Lille regionals. Didn't see anything out of the 2 most recent tournaments in Malaysia and in Indonesia, at least in their top 8s as far as control decks go. But I could see like someone, being like, well, this is what the Kyurems are playing, this is what the Giratinas are playing, this is what the Palkia
Just try
Intellions are
to take
playing.
advantage of it.
Yeah, and then being like, okay, maybe I can put something together a little bit more, maybe a little bit better, like or refine the lists that we saw in Lille and just come out with a decent Mewtwo v Union control deck to kind of dominate the tournament with maybe.
So the
Also, Sander
last,
Sander might be Sander wasn't at Lille, but I think Sander is going to Warsaw. So
So we'll definitely
8.
see one control in top 8,
Yeah,
right?
there'll definitely be one control top 8.
That is true. Yeah, Sander Wojcik, of course, like the most well-known control player, one of the most well-known players in the game, just period, but
Yeah.
absolutely well known for being the best control player in the game, and he always loves to take advantage of the meta in any way that he can. I'm excited to see what ends up happening there if he is indeed going. So the last European regionals was Lille in France, and Mew VMAX ended up winning. Everyone cut their Drapions from the Tina decks, from the Palkias. Nobody had Drapion ready to go, and Mew was able to kind of get a clean sweep through the top cut. Do you think that people should adjust to that now, and we should start to see Drapion make its way back into Giratina, back into Palkia potentially, or just in general in decks? Like maybe if you're playing Mew, is it worth playing Drapion for the mirror this weekend, which is something that people did early on in the format for your Lost Origin?
I think so. I think it was pretty reasonable. Like if we looked at like Salt Lake City, there wasn't a ton of Mew at Salt Lake City because there was so much Drapion at Peoria, which makes kind of sense. And then it kind of like the shift from there was like, oh, there's gonna be so little Mew. Why would I play Drapion? And then like everyone at Salt Lake City still played Drapion. Um, like everyone at Peoria played Drapion, and there was a ton of Mew. It didn't do
Yeah.
as well because of that. Going
Yeah.
to Salt Lake City, everyone kept their Drapions. We go to Lille, and then it's like, okay, everyone cut their Drapions, or a lot of people cut their Drapions. Not everyone, but enough people did that Mew won the tournament. And now from here, do we go like, okay, well, Mew won. So are more people going to play Mew because those players because it was able to get through because like the Giratina's pretty much cut Drapion is why Mew was able to win that tournament. Um, so now do you? I think the Tina players will put the Drapions back in. Those who didn't play it, I think they'll be like, well, I don't want that to happen again. And I think Mew will see a slight rise in popularity as well, just because it did win, and we are seeing just less Drapion overall. So I think it won't be like a ton of. And I don't think everyone's going to put Drapions back in. I don't think as many people are going to play Mew, but it'll be kind of like a little bit of an increase in both. A little bit more Drapion, a little bit more Mew. So both will be pretty reasonable to. It'll be reasonable to include the Drapion. It'll also still be pretty reasonable to play Mew, I think.
Well, I think that Lost Box is also the deck where the Drapion feels the most impactful because it takes a matchup that is close. I think like maybe slightly Mew favored if there's no Drapion. To almost an auto win, it feels like, as Giratina, because the way the Mew decks are built right now with no single prize attackers, they're all using Mew VMAX. You just take one knockout with Drapion and then one knockout with Star Requiem, right?
Mhm.
Mew can do some cute things, maybe with Hero's Medal or something like that, but it feels like a lot of the Tina decks are on Lost Vacuum now. So it's people have kind of the answers to any of these things. So I think taking a matchup from 50-50 to slightly unfavorable to a near auto win, especially after it just won the last tournament, is definitely very much worth it. And, it does have the benefit in Lost Box of just being able to be pretty quickly and easily thrown away when you see it in a matchup you don't want it in, right? You can kind of just get it out of the deck
Yeah.
pretty quickly from a Colress or a Comfy, so always makes it a quick, easy decision off of a flower
Yeah.
selecting if it's a matchup you don't need it. So
It definitely has the highest impact in the Tina deck. And yeah, I think just playing it in there makes so much sense. Yeah, I think the matchup is like unfavorable if you don't have the Drapion for sure. So throw it back in there. But yeah, I think it'll be about the same. I don't think too much is gonna switch up because of that.
so do you think
Because even
that,
though Mew won.
if Tina players should put Drapion back in, is that going to have a significant impact on Mew's chances to win another regionals or like have a deep run through Top Cut?
I mean a little bit, but I don't think it's gonna be like I don't think like we're even seeing like at like if you talk about like Peoria regionals, we saw Kirin players playing Drapion, right? So and even Palkia, like Cal got second and had a Drapion in their Palkia. Like I don't think we're gonna see. I wouldn't add it to Palkia back, even though it is good in the matchup. Like it does increase your win rate against Mew to have the Drapion in Palkia. Like it's such a bad starter in every other matchup. I don't think I would rock it because I think you can beat Mew pretty consistently without it. So I would say yeah, I don't think those decks are going to be adding Drapions back in because they've all pretty much cut the Drapions, right? Kirims really aren't playing Drapion. Palkia's not really playing Drapion. I don't think I ever see any of those decks playing Drapion. So I think Mew is still a pretty safe play because I think some Giratinas will probably still choose not to play the Drapion, right? Like I think a majority of the ones that didn't play it, if you're like looking at like let's say 50% of them played it at what's called Little Regionals, probably 75% will play it now at Warsaw could just be a number out there, but I don't think like the Kirims and Palkias are adding it back in. So I think Mew is still a pretty solid play, and it's not like unwinnable. You can beat the Drapion Giratina. It's pretty tough. It's a bad matchup overall, but I think Mew still it's just a good deck.
So we talked a bit last week about the Indonesia and Malaysia Regional League tournaments. Of course, Kyurem dominating in Indonesia alongside Mew, both of those decks making up pretty much all of their top cut. And then in Malaysia, Hisuian Zoroark VSTAR kind of being a little bit of a surprise. Did win the event, also had two other players making top cut with it. Do you think that players going to Warsaw will take these tournaments into consideration whenever they're picking a deck for this weekend? For me, I kind of feel like anyone who is a sort of on the fence about Zork, like they enjoy the deck, but maybe don't have the confidence to take it into a big tournament, can look at those results from Malaysia and say, okay, this does potentially have the legs in the right meta to make a deep run through an event. Obviously, it did just win that tournament. So I think like there's a chance that Zoroark will breathe some confidence into the players who enjoy that deck. But other than that, I don't know. Like, I mean, Kyurem winning Indonesia, I don't think should have a big impact because I think everyone kind of recognizes Kyurem's going to be a pretty played deck regardless, right?
Yeah, so I could see the yeah, and they were pretty. I feel like pretty wonky results overall from what we've seen so far, and the tournaments were smaller and best of one, which I think does impact like results from tournaments being best of one. Because there's like less chance for. I mean, just it's just a higher chance for just stuff that wouldn't like the more rounds you have in a tournament, the more games that are played from certain players or from players in general. Like the better decks and better players will usually rise to the top because of that. So three Zork in top eight, I think that's a little bit of an anomaly. And even the result, like Kyurem winning, isn't that big of a deal. Two Kyurem in top finals isn't even that weird. But like four Kyurem, or is it three Kyurem and four Mew in top cut?
Yep.
That felt a little weird as well. So I think both those tournaments just being smaller tournaments and best of one, like this is going to have an impact on results a little bit. So I don't think anyone's looking too deeply into the results. Although I do think, like I think, like you said, like three Zoroark in top eight, I think could definitely instill some confidence in the Zoroark mains of the world to maybe try and relook at it or just give them the confidence to bring the deck to Warsaw. And I do think Zoroark is like pretty solid overall. I feel like I've said that like every single time we talk about Zoroark. It does have bad matchups where it's like you could be playing something like a Giratina or a Palkia or even Mew that don't really have any terrible matchups. Or you could play a little bit more polarizing of a pick, something like the Zoroark, and hope to draw and run a little bit hot. So it's always a viable option.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe someone will feel a little confident with the Zoroark now after seeing it win. So maybe it'll make a run in Warsaw this
Yeah.
weekend.
I mean, I would be hype if it made that'd be cool if it made top
Yeah, for
top eight or
sure.
whatever.
Always down to see something like that. Now let's talk a little bit about Palkia. We kind of identified it as still the best deck in the format to start things off, even though it hasn't been the most played. It's still the kind of the meta defining deck. Everyone recognizes it as, I think, the highest power level. It feels like and once it sets up, just the fact that you can do so much with it is really strong. But there's been a ton of different ways that people are playing it. I would say like much more differently than even most top decks in the past. Like usually it feels like there's like a 56, 57 card list that everyone goes by and bases their list off of, with a couple of changes here and there for whatever the best deck is. For
Yeah.
Palkia's case, though, it almost feels like a 50 card printout to like, this is like the 50 cards you should play. And then there's like 10 spots where you could make changes and adjustments. And I think that's in part due to how strong Inteleon and Irida are together. But I'm curious, Azul, what some of your thoughts are on some of these best inclusions for these last few spots. So starting with the Pokemon, some of these, like obviously every Palkia is going to be playing at least 3/3 Palkia. They're going to be playing at least a 3/3/1 Inteleon line. Some people don't play the fourth Sobble. Probably worth playing fourth Sobble in my opinion, but some of these other Pokemon that people have had in their decks. We've seen Drapion V, Crabominable V, Empoleon V, Quick Shooting Inteleon, Galarian Zigzagoon, and Crobat. Do you have kind of one or two favorite ones that you think you would include, or maybe a couple that you think you definitely would not worry about playing as the format closes out here?
Yeah, I can hear before I talk about that, I can hear Bradner typing up a tweet right now. No, actually, there's only 58 cards that are optimal, and you can maybe adjust two depending on the meta. But and I think the biggest, like I will say, like I think the biggest thing where you do look at like, and I think this is kind of just coming around recently, where we start to see the more quick ball based build that we saw Fabian make top eight with at Lil, where that's like the biggest shift in card count or card adjustment count, where it's like instead of playing four VIP pass, you're looking at four quick ball and a Crobat to kind of be your extra consistency throughout a game instead of trying to look for those more explosive starts through the Battle VIP pass all the time. So that's like kind of the biggest adjustment. But as far as the Pokemon goes, like I said, a Drapion, not a huge fan of. Crabominable, also not a huge fan of, unless there was 3 Mewtwo v Union in day 2, and Sander is, as far as I know, Sander's going to Warsaw. So until Sander says otherwise, assume Sander's at Warsaw. There will probably be at least 1 Mewtwo v Union in the room, unless they've come up with something else. So Crabominable has more value if you play in Europe consistently, I feel like. So, but overall, I'm not a huge fan of the Crabominable. And Polio, not a huge fan. Quick shooting, I really like. And actually, something interesting that has happened recently is like, if we look at specifically the 2 top 8 lists from Lil, neither of them played Zigzagoon. Neither Owen, or I believe it was Owen, right? Owen and Fabian. Neither of them played Zigzagoon, which had kind of become a staple in the deck, I feel like, for a while over quick shooting. And initially, when the Palkia first came out, I was definitely a big fan of Zigzagoon over quick shooting. But I feel like maybe the format has kind of just like slowed down a little bit. You're not as concerned with like turn 2 KO a V and your opponent's active anymore. And it's more so like, okay, I have time to get to my quick shooting before I need that extra ping damage. And of course, there's an argument about 3 Sobble versus 4 Sobble, but I think if you play quick shooting, you should definitely play 4 Sobble. Besides that, if you don't play the quick shooting, I guess you can make an argument for 3 Sobble, but I'm a big fan of 4. And then, the last thing would be the Crobat, which I think if you play the heavy quick ball build, you have to play.
Yeah.
But if you're playing the 4 VIP pass, I'm a little bit untested in that, so I'm not sure. But do you have any thoughts on the optimal tech poke to bring, Chip?
I think I do definitely like the Crobat the most of them, and lean towards playing the 2 to 3, at least 2, probably like 3 at minimum copies of Quick Ball, just because I feel like that's where Palkia falls short most often, is just in that early game setup, and Crobat lets you reach quite a bit more.
Yeah.
It's just about getting established. The quick shooting Inteleon, I'm actually a little bit more iffy on, just for the sole reason of how impactful it is to give up access to Shady Dealings Inteleon, right? Because if you're using Drizzile to evolve into quick shooting Inteleon, that means you can't evolve it into Shady Dealings Inteleon that turn. And that's one of the most important cards, arguably the most important card of the deck, to be honest.
Yeah, so I think that's where like an argument for like another card to talk about would be Rare Candy. Was like, if you play the Rare Candy, like that makes it like that makes quick shooting more consistent and more powerful, especially when you only get down like a couple Sobble in the early game.
Sure.
It's really hard or almost impossible to commit one of those Sobbles or Drizziles to a quick shooting, right? Like sometimes you're just like, well, I have to make this a Drizzile and a Shady Dealings Inteleon. I can't get the quick shooting play to start to build up damage on a specific Pokemon for a play at all. But Rare Candy enables it a little bit more aggressively to have like the option of both sooner.
So a couple supporters that we've seen kind of make their way in and out of lists have been Leon and Raihan. I think other than that, the 4 Irida, 1 Melanie, 1 Boss, 1 Roxanne, like that has been pretty standard. I don't think
Sometimes
people
a
have really
Marnie
deviated. Oh yeah, and a Marnie as well. Yeah, Marnie has.
But that's not
Marnie's
even
almost kind of become a staple at this point. It feels like just having that other disruption option that's not just Roxanne feels like most people have really been on that. But Leon and Raihan, we've seen in lists here and there. Some people playing neither of them. Some people playing one. We've also seen second Melanie pop up. I think Fabian had 2 Melanie in his list that he got top 8 with in France. So Leon or Raihan, do you have a preference on which one of those you feel like is stronger? I kind of don't dislike the Leon at all, just because of how I've talked about this before on the cast, just because of giving you that extra push and surprise factor, right? Especially if you have other damage modifiers like Choice Belt, Echoing Horn being a damage modifier, since it adds 20 damage effectively with a bringing a Pokemon back out of your opponent's discard pile, Zigzagoon, or Quick Shooting. Like, you can boost 70 to 90 damage and surprise your opponent pretty reasonably with the Leon.
So I don't like Leon because I feel like I would rather. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do extra damage, right? Echoing Horn, Zigzagoon, Scoop Up Net
but
to reset
it's
Zigzagoon,
more damage.
Rare Candy. Yeah, but I would rather play something like the Zigzagoon or another Scoop Up Net or a Rare Candy.
In addition, maybe the Rare.
You can't play all of that.
Yeah, sure. That's why these people play 1 Quick Ball in their deck.
So they can have room for their Leon.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I don't think you have room for all of it. So I'd rather play any of those other things first because they're more versatile, right? A Rare Candy can get on my Quick Shooting sooner, which becomes plus 20 damage, would maybe replace the Leon, but it can also Rare Candy out my Shady Dealings Inteleon and stuff like that, right? So I'd rather play another Scoop Up Net or the Zigzagoon or the quick shooting to begin with, or a candy to get out to quick shooting more efficiently, anything like that. So I can just like, it's more flexible than just Leon, which is like I have to have this already huge setup ready to go and be able to play Leon as my supporter for the turn and lead that to me winning a game, as opposed to just playing something a little more flexible. So I'd rather play any of those over Leon. The Rhyhorn I actually kind of like, but I don't know if it's better than second Melanie. If you are looking for another supporter that can get energy into play, is Rhyhorn better than Melanie? The one play you can pull off with it is you can pull off those back-to-back Greninja plays. So like if you use Greninja and your opponent's like, well, the Greninja's been used, I don't have to worry about it. They go boss KO a Palkia. Then you can be like, okay, Rhyhorn to my Greninja, use Greninja again. So there's like that sneaky play that you gain from playing Rhyhorn. Doesn't come up too often.
Yeah, like what matchup is
And
that even great against,
like
right? Because
Lost Zone decks like Tina.
I guess so. Like they have to have multiple. The thing with Tina as well is like they have to have multiple comfy in play, which is hard
Yeah.
to do after two have already been KO'd, right? So if you've
Sometimes
done
mirror match if they don't get their mana feed
yeah,
down. Like you use the
potentially.
first one, they're like, they don't want to go KO your Greninja, and they're like, all right, I'm gonna ignore this. And that's one of the things. It's definitely a tech where it's like it works the first time, but game two, game three, you're not getting the value out of it. So it depends. Like, do you even want to play another energy acceleration supporter? If you identify you do, which like in my testing with Palkia is limited, so I don't even know if you do. Like the one Melanie might just be enough. If you do want to play another energy acceleration supporter, is the Rhyhorn better than the second Melanie becomes the question, right?
And it also could
I
just
don't
be
think I think
Palpad
you're
in
playing
that
three.
spot too, right? Because Palpad could get you the second Melanie, and it also can reuse Boss or reuse Marnie or something like
Yeah.
that, right? Palpad's been a card that has been popular in Palkia in the past, and it's really not been in any lists in this format, I feel
Yeah.
like. So that's a card that's really fallen out of favor that maybe if you're looking for another spot, that's something to consider as well instead of one of these other cards. You mentioned a couple of items already, being one, the main one, I guess, being the rare candy, which you seem to be definitely a fan of. There's a few other item cards that people have been teching in and out. We've seen Canceling Cologne pop up. Also, Big Charm has become much more popular, I think, in part due to how popular Reggie and Giratina have been. Big Charm's a pretty good card in both of those matchups. And also, the Battle VIP Pass count is something that has been a little debated. It feels like most people are currently on the 4 VIP Pass, but, Fabian did just get top 8 with the 1 VIP Pass. So, I don't know. I think, like, playing the 1 less VIP Pass does obviously create plenty more space. Makes it easier to play something like the Crobat, for sure, right? And you play more quick balls. But it feels so bad to rely on VIP Pass because if you play 4 and then just don't get one on turn 1 going first, it's just you're playing a 56 card deck with 4 clunky cards that do nothing in them. But if you go first or go second even and you get 1 or 2 VIP Pass, like your game, you just know you're going to be cruising, right?
Yeah, it's like one of those things where I haven't really tested a whole ton to not play the 4 VIP pass, and then like you don't gain that much space because like you do have to play 4 quick ball, right? And then we even see Fabian play to capture energy as well. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you're already like playing 2 to 3 quick ball plus the 4 VIP pass to begin with, so you do gain a little bit of space. And yeah, you just don't have as many of those games where you just have dead cards in your deck, or you don't get a turn 1 and you literally can't use it anymore. So whenever you top deck one or draw one off a prize card, it's not like a completely dead card, and you have options and outs out of it. So. And we saw Fabian do very well with it. I think Robin Robin was playing the. Oh no, I think Robin was actually playing the 4 VIP pass list actually. So I take that back. Still was playing the Lost Cities, which is the next thing we'll talk about stadiums in here. But I don't know. I would have to like play it more. I think there is like definitely some validity to it, but I'm just not a Palkia player, so I don't know how much how much I care about one way or the other. But just the VIP passes has definitely been the go to, and the results are there for it as well. So it's hard to argue against the 4 VIP pass.
Yeah, and speaking of the stadiums, in Fabian's list, he had the 2 Lost City and the 1 Path to the Peak. I know at I think it was Salt Lake, Bradner posted his list, and he had 2 Paths to the Peak with the 1 training court. It feels like the standard has been 1 path, 1 training court. Lost City has made its way into more and more lists, though, as the format has continued to develop. Do you have any strong opinions about Lost City being good? Playing 2 copies maybe over 1, or losing access to Training Court, which to me Training Court has always been one of the stronger cards in the deck.
Yeah, and maybe that's why Fabian went with the second Melanie, right? Like no trading court. Like
Right.
usually you play around training court as if you're going to get 1 access to it, and it becomes an extra energy. Plus, it's a bump to Path to the Peak. So the Melanie gets you that extra energy. So that just might be the trade off there from Fabian. But I guess also another thing to mention is sometimes people play no path to the peak, and we saw
Yeah,
Owen
Owen.
playing no path. I definitely like a path to the peak personally. I think it's a pretty big deal in the Mew matchup. Like I think it's a big if you're not gonna play Drapion, I think you basically have to play path to the peak to have like a consistent Mew matchup. And then it has its uses in the late game or even early game against Giratina as well, because they don't play a bunch of ways to bump stadiums, but they're very reliant on Greninja to constantly be able to see cards. And Luminion can be a pretty big way for them to, find, their first Colress or any Colress. So I like it a lot. I like the path a lot. And the cities, I mean, they're good. If you're trying to beat Reggie, really good against that. Really good against Sablezard as well, because a lot of times Sablezard is reliant on using Charizard twice. So if you just lost City KO their Charizard, they can just lose. Or if they like lost City a couple Sableyes or like a Sableye early, and then you start to lost City their Sableyes,
Yeah,
the same thing. They just like run out of attackers potentially. So it's
yeah.
got some pretty good matchups, and you can be like situationally good up against the uh Giratina deck as well. Like if they want to reuse their Sableye or Cram or whatever it might be, you can Lost City, get rid of that. So a little bit less situation, a little bit less good, but it's really good against Reggie if you're trying to beat Reggie, and then really good against Lost Box. So I think there's some validity just depending on what's popular in the meta. So I think it is just definitely kind of like a meta call for sure.
Well, that's enough about
Just the
Palkia.
games.
You did mention the Regis, and obviously you are someone who's very experienced with Regis in this format. It's been absent from these last few tournaments. Top cuts. Do you have any thoughts as to like specific reasons as why you don't think it was in Top Cut and Lil or Malaysia or Indonesia? And do you think? I mean, because obviously in Salt Lake there was four in Top Cut, right? So
Yeah.
it's a pretty big difference to go from half of Top Cut to absent from three Top Cuts in a row. Do you think Reggie's is due for a resurgence this weekend? Was it getting countered too hard? Maybe. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, we saw it like low, like like I mentioned, Fabian double Lost City.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think Robin was playing double Lost City as well. So like there was some people having some techs that were very good against Reggie. But I think it still probably would have been a solid play overall. And I think if I was going to Warsaw, I actually tweeted this out last night. If I was going to Warsaw, I would play Reggie's. I don't know the exact 60 I would play. Probably wouldn't tech for SQ. I don't think anyone's going to be bringing SQ anymore. I think people are over that. So I would be playing Reggie, probably for sure. I think it's still a very good deck. I think it's like I said, it has like I mentioned last week. I think it just has a stigma about it of it just being not a good deck or an inconsistent clunky deck. I think a lot of that is just people not knowing how to play it properly. Of course, so that's going to be the same thing with any deck along the way. But some decks are a little bit easier to at least do something on your turn. Whereas when you whiff an attack because you missequence, you just did absolutely nothing. So it feels worse when you mess up with Reggie than some
Mm-hmm.
other decks, I guess. But yeah, still very strong deck. I think it's being, I wouldn't say criminally underplayed, but I think it's definitely underplayed for how good it is. And I wouldn't be surprised if it did very well at Warsaw. I don't think, and I also don't think me saying this is going to have everyone putting Empoleons and SQs and Lost Cities in their deck. So if
Sure.
you want to bring it, don't worry about me mentioning it to be a reason to not bring it. I don't think anyone's that stressed about Reggie. So you'll still do very well if you play the Reggie.
So, do you think that potentially Malaysia and Indonesia being best of one tournaments had an impact on players' desire to bring Reggie? Because I think even you've talked about before how Reggie's a deck that kind of enjoys having that best of three option. So, if you do have a clunky hand with a couple ordinary rods, or like you just don't get much going early on, miss an attack on a key turn, like you have two more games to kind of bounce back, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that best of one might be a reason to is it might be a reason for its lack of success, and also just reason people didn't bring it. Yeah, because I definitely feel like it is a little bit stronger in a best two out of three because you are bricking. I don't know, one of every. I want to say one of every three games, or maybe roughly like one of every three games. You are probably drawing a pretty bad, like straight up bricking, or just drawing poorly enough where like you need your opponent to kind of be drawing a little bit poorly alongside you to have a chance in it, which does sometimes happen. Sometimes you're bricking, but they're bricking, so it's fine. But yeah, I would definitely say that's probably a pretty solid reason for it. The
And then
best of
like
one is probably the biggest thing.
the other main single prize deck in the format is the Sableye Radiant Charizard deck, the Cramorants as well.
Yeah.
Um, hasn't really been as popular. It won the first regionals in Peoria, and it's just pretty much not been present in any of the top cuts since then. I don't think, right? So
Yeah.
a
Um.
little bit of a question mark there, maybe, or I mean, especially because before Peoria online events, it was just dominating. It was like the top best deck. And I think maybe a reason for why it was dominating so early is because I think people just naturally enjoy playing on single prize decks, right? It
Mhm.
kind of feels like good old fashioned Pokemon, maybe, or and spread decks as well is something that people love to play. So these things, I think, maybe all led to it being so popular online, and it was just good, and it utilized the new Lost Zone cards, which people were excited about. And nobody had a great Giratina list yet. I think that might be the biggest factor as to why Sableye was so successful, because that list got optimized much quicker than Giratina lists got optimized, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. It just yeah, it was like, and it wasn't even that popular at Peoria as well, right? Like
No,
Sablezard
no.
wasn't like
It
this
was
wasn't
it was like
popular,
in the top. No, it was like in the top 5, I think. But like it wasn't.
but it was like
Everyone expected it to be the most popular deck, and it was like fourth
yeah,
or fifth. So yeah,
yeah.
definitely not nearly as popular as you would have thought.
And I think that'll probably be the same. It'll be in that, but it'll be like a, even if it's like the fifth most popular, because like what we saw at Peoria, it was like Jiren was way more popular than everything else, and then it was like Tina, Mew, Palkia, 100 plus, 100 plus, 100 plus, and then it was like Sablezard 60, right? Which is a pretty big drop off. And I think it'll still sit in that kind of spot. I think it's still a very powerful deck, very good deck. Um, it is the hardest deck to play in the format, I think. So I think that's a little bit intimidating for some players to want to pick it up. And I think that is probably a reasonable reason why a lot of players probably shouldn't pick it up, especially this close to the tournament if you haven't played it a lot with it. But if it is your favorite deck or you enjoy the deck, I would say yes, it's definitely still a very solid play. I don't think there's really going to be too much to worry about as far as like bad matchups go. Maybe the Lost Cities in the Palkias would be annoying if more people pick that up. But like I don't think Gudra or anything is going to be popular enough. Which is like talking about Gudra, like where did Gudra go? It won Salt Lake City.
Yeah, it's
That's it.
gone.
And that is a
Peace
is it,
out.
it I think the deck is solid. I don't know how powerful I think the deck is overall, but I don't know. Yeah. I mean, this is it. No more Gudra.
Gudra's done. Yeah. Speaking of which, Arceus decks, Gudra kind of being at the front of that conversation, I would say right now. Arceus
Yeah.
Giratina also still a played deck, and then also, I guess the other one would be Arceus Flying Pikachu stuff, which was able to get second place at Salt Lake City.
Was Salt Lake City just an anomaly? Gudra
Dude,
and
I think
Flying Peak in top
Americans
two?
just love Arceus, I guess, like Arceus won all of our regionals up until Piper won with Baltimore in
Did
Baltimore
it really?
with.
Did it win every North American event?
Yeah, yeah, it won every single North American regionals and NAIC. You won with that as well.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
because the first one was Drew with Arceus Gengar, and then what was after that? Like Indianapolis or something.
Yeah. So that was Ian.
Ian with his Arceus deck,
New
and then
Jersey was won by Arceus B Barrel. Then Parker won with Arceus Hammers,
Hammers, and
and
then
then
Arceus Duraludon. Like,
Arceus Around. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
yeah, Arceus won all the North American regionals last season and NAIC. And then Piper
Yeah.
won, Tord won, both with Radiant Charizard decks, obviously both very
Yeah.
different. And so Arceus was like, oh, is it dead and gone? Nope. Both of them in the finals in Salt Lake.
Yeah, yeah. Arceus was never winning, I think, either of those tournaments, the
No.
Baltimore or Peoria. But yeah, I get. But then yeah, the Arceus, the P and the
I
Guja
mean, going into
came
Salt
back
Lake, though, you
around.
wouldn't have thought it was going to ever win Salt Lake, I think, right?
Gudra, I wouldn't have, but like I wasn't that shocked that Gudra did well, especially once there was so much Reggie in day two for it to kind of feast on. But the Arceus Pikachu, that was definitely a surprise to be that far up, I think for sure. That was a little bit, yeah, didn't expect it. The unexpected.
So
Pikachu
if you
wasn't like
had to
that big of a
sleeve
shock
up,
though.
if you were going to a tournament, if you're going to Warsaw or maybe a local tournament, whatever, this weekend, and you were like, you know what, I'm American, I've got to play Arceus.
You saying all the Americans that are going to Warsaw are going to play Arceus?
Yeah,
next?
maybe they will, the Arceus invasion or something.
Yeah, they got to keep the Arceus. They got to keep the Arceus streak going. They got to prove its dominance.
So
I mean, probably
what color energies are you going with this weekend if you're sleeving up an Arceus deck?
I probably go with Gudra. I think Arceus Peak. I've actually played quite a bit more and played in a tournament. I wasn't really blown away by how good the deck was. It's like okay. And Arceus Tina, I think, just has a bad Giratina matchup, like Lost on Giratina. So I would go with the Gudra, I think, which has like actually I think has a fine Giratina matchup. Because like with double parasol and stuff, you just make things awkward. Maybe increase like if you're looking at Hale's list, increase the Marnie count a little bit for that matchup. Just like Marnie's really good against Lost Zone deck, so increase that Marnie count a little bit. But yeah, I would probably go with the Arceus Gudra if I had to rock a Arceus deck. But I also just wouldn't play Arceus. I think that would be the first thing. But if for some reason you're locked in on Arceus, go with the goo.
Keep it sticky in Poland.
All
Well,
right, so That's gonna do it for talking about Warsaw Regionals. Good luck to anyone who is going. Don't play Arceus. And yeah, good luck to all the North American players specifically that are going. It'd be very cool to see some of them get into the top 8 and
Yeah,
battle it out
Tord
region
came
versus
over
region.
and stole one of our regionals, right? We got to go take one
Yeah,
back.
yeah, gotta go take one back. Um, Next thing we're gonna talk about is the Crown Zenith, right?
Zenith, I think.
Zenith
Yeah.
Zenith set that was announced. This is where we're finally going to be getting the. This is what I've been waiting. I was like, when are we going to get these cards? The Zacian, the Zamazenta, the V-Star. We're finally getting these, but this is going to be our January set. Um,
It's like a
what actually?
collector's set too. It's not like a full
Yeah,
blown set expansion release.
yeah, not going to be like a full blown competitive set. We're going to get some pretty impactful cards potentially. We're going to be in some V-Stars that we've been waiting on for a while. Like I mentioned, the Z's, and then we're also going to get like the Rotom V-Star finally, which has taken forever for us to get. But we're finally getting that as well. But we'll see if a
Assumedly, I
collector
don't think
set.
that the Rotom
Assumedly.
is the Rotom's not included in the press announcement. All it says is 8 Pokemon V Star, including Zacian V Star and Zamazenta V Star. So, I mean, assumedly one would be Rotom because that's
Okay.
another V Star we haven't gotten yet. So, I mean,
Yeah, we
that
got
would
to
just
get it
make
at
the most
some point.
sense.
The one thing I'm wondering then, like, because this is coming out, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of these cards. Some of the artwork is very cool as well. I've actually finally gotten to take a look at it. We'll talk about this in a second. But when are we gonna? Are we? Do you think we're gonna get that product that has an EX card in it, like we always get? Like when tag teams first came out, or when V Stars first came out, we always got a product that had the first of a card,
Oh
first of the
yeah.
new cards. Do you think we're gonna get an EX? It was always in January too. We always got it in January. Did we get one for V Stars? Was it Arceus? No.
No,
Was it
there
just
was
V
not a
Star?
product for V Stars, but it's not usually for the new game mechanic in the middle of a series, right? So like what Azul is talking about is like I mean, the Pokemon TCG kind of operates on the same rotation schedule
Yeah.
cycle as the video games, right? So like all of the last sets the last couple of years have been Sword and Shield sets. And the new mechanic for Sword and Shield era was Pokemon V. And so before Sword and Shield base set came out, we got a promo box that was the Meowth VMAX premium collection. So it was the very first ever Pokemon V. So that's what Azul's talking about is like
Yeah, yeah.
before the new set Scarlet and Violet, which is supposedly coming out in February of next year, will we get a Pokemon EX collection box? And I would say probably
Yeah.
so. It does not usually happen for like the mid. So like we got one
Okay,
for
it doesn't
tag
happen in the
teams. We,
middle.
we got one for tag teams. Like the very first tag team was Wailord and Magikarp tag team. It came
Okay.
out before the Team Up expansion, which was the first full, release of tag teams, but there wasn't one for like Ultra Beasts, right? Which was the new gameplay mechanic. There was Ultra Beast collection boxes eventually, but they didn't come out before Crimson Invasion.
Okay, so
Um,
sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. But yeah, so sometimes we're gonna get the cool new kind of card in January. We've always gotten it with the base set release,
yeah, the new
and
series.
sometimes in the middle we'll get one as well. So next January we might get, I don't know, whatever else they decide to do with
EX
the X's after that.
squared.
Yeah, EX squared.
EX2.
Um, but yeah, we'll probably. I mean, this is another thing we'll probably get in January. Like, theoretically, we'll get a EX collection box in January as well, before or after the set. I don't even know when this set is supposed to drop, the date wise, but
Yeah, so this new set will come out January 20th,
oh, it
and
does say.
it's going to be a collector's set similar to like Pokemon Go or Champions Path, something like that, Shining Legends, one of those type of sets where it's going to be 160 cards and a 70 card Galarian gallery. So instead of the trainer gallery, we're gonna have the Galarian gallery, and some more cards from that did get revealed. Most likely, this is coming out cards from the V Star Universe set, which just came out in Japan this weekend. Um, and oh no, sorry, they're coming out next month in Japan. Excuse me, and they will become part of our Crown Zenith sets. And some of these artworks, by the way, like I'm someone who personally plays low rarity. I know Azul also is someone who plays the low rarity uncommons. I'm not going after the full arts and stuff like that for my decks, but these cards are pretty sweet, to be honest. Some of this artwork is
Yeah,
absolutely insane.
yeah. I think one of the cool parts is like some of them have, like, if you look at the Mewtwo and the Charizard, they're like the same, not the same artwork, but they're the same battle going on. Actually, it might be the same just from a different perspective. It's hard to tell.
It is the same
Um,
battle, but yeah, a different perspective, most likely, right?
yeah.
Like,
And the one that looked really funny to me was the Samurai. There's just the Samurai V-Star. You see that one? It's just a
yeah, yeah, yeah. With
there's a
the
snow
little
run.
snow
What is
run
it?
chilling there in the front.
Why is there a snow run there? What is going on?
He's a spooky guy.
Makes absolutely no sense. It's just a snow run there.
He's just
But yeah,
chilling.
the artworks are definitely sick. And I guess one thing I do want to mention. So none of these are going to be like we're getting a new Manaphy artwork, but it's not a reprint. So it's like an impactful card, or like the Diancie, we're getting a new Diancie artwork, but they're all still in the F block. I don't have we gone to another block yet? Actually, I don't even know.
No, so
Um,
most likely, G block would start with Sword and Shield base set.
yeah, okay. So these are still F. So like they're not going to
So they
be
like kind of always try
extended.
to pair it with gameplay mechanics or like with the
Yeah.
so like the D block was the first few Sword and Shield sets, and then battle styles introduced Rapid Strike and Single
Yeah.
Strike,
So it'll be the February set will
right?
always be the new block.
And then
Okay,
V
that makes
Stars
sense.
came out, and that is like
Yeah.
was the next block. So yeah, our February set or early, early of the year set. Sometimes it's been in January, sometimes February. Um,
So a lot
will
of
be the
this
new
is going to
regulation arc.
be the artwork type stuff. There's supposed to be 3 Radiant Pokemon. Radiant Charizard, we think is just going to be a reprint of
Yeah,
the
it
current
it
Radiant
is.
Charizard.
It is.
Oh, it
Yeah,
is.
it's weird
But we're
because
also
it
supposed
says in
to.
the press release 3 brand new Radiant Pokemon, including Radiant Charizard,
Yeah.
but just like right after that announcement came out, came the announcement showing this new artwork of Radiant Charizard, which is the exact same text and ability and everything as our current Radiant Charizard. So I don't think that we're gonna get a third Radiant Charizard. I don't know. They know
It's
Charizard makes them
possible.
money, so who knows?
I mean, I would like that just because I could get a new card. We're also supposed to get a Radiant Charjabug and a Radiant Eternatus, which will be new and have new Radiant effects. And I love the Radiant Pokemon personally, so I'm excited for those. And Chip was saying we haven't gotten a Lightning or a Dragon Radiant Pokemon yet.
That's
So
right.
Charjabug probably going to be Lightning. And then I guess the Eternatus could be a Dragon Radiant Pokemon, right?
Yeah, which would be really cool. We haven't had a dragon one, and I do think it is interesting that it is Radiant Charjabug and not a Radiant Vikavolt. That is the first Pokemon that's not like its fully evolved form. Well,
Yeah.
I guess besides Eevee, Eevee would be the exception there,
Yeah.
but Eevee's kind of a special case. But every other Pokemon is like its final form, or it's just a basic that doesn't evolve, like Holucha or Heatran. So interesting that it's going to be Charjabug, but most of the like for some reason they just love Charjabug. Charjabug always has like kind of something cool going on with it, like a unique ability or something like that, right?
Yeah, big Charjabug fans over there. Which I'm glad they're giving like love to like Pokemon in that kind of way as well. So yeah, I'm excited for some new Radiants for sure. And hopefully the Charizard is a new one, but it sounds like it is just going to be a different artwork
Yeah, I
of
think so.
which makes sense because they love printing more Charizards of different Charizards, same Charizards, whatever.
So
More
we
Charizard
talked
all the time.
about Zacian and Zamazenta V-Star when they got revealed, but I don't think we ever really talked much about Rotom V-Star. And assuming that it comes out in Crown Zenith, I think Rotom V-Star, it did get top 8 at the Japan Champions League
Yeah.
earlier on this year. The list never got posted, so it's still kind of a mystery exactly what was going on there. I do believe it got streamed though, so maybe a detective could go in and try to piece together that exact list. But you were telling me that you were actually playing recently on stream or whatever with just the regular Rotom V, the
Yeah.
most recent one, and how Rotom V Star just kind of is a buff to that. Do you want to talk about your thoughts on the potential for
Yeah.
a card like this?
So Rotom V actually wasn't terrible when I played it, and that's without the V Star. Actually, it's kind of curious because like, and hopefully this is just like this is kind of the end of this block and this era or whatever, this block of Pokemon where we have the little bit of more of a desync with the Japanese format. But it seems like if we are supposed to rotate with the release of the first EX set, that we're going to be in sync with Japan from there on out. But hopefully they also sync up all the cards that are legal in Japan with us at the same time, even if the products are different, right? Like they've had Rotom V Star legal in Japan for a while now, right?
Yes.
But even if they sync up our rotations, they should also sync up when the cards are legal as well, right? So hopefully
Yeah.
stuff like this Rotom will be released to us pretty much around the same time it's released in Japan with all the other cards that are released in Japan when they get their Rotom, hopefully for the future. So hopefully maybe this is just like the end of this. Before we get into the EX stuff, they'll start to sync it up better with us in Japan. If they do intend for us to be on the same kind of rotation schedule as Japan, which is what I assume is what they're trying to do here. Because usually we have rotation right after Worlds, and Japan has rotation in January, February. And now our rotation is supposed to be happening early next year. We don't know when. That's the only thing they've told us is early next year. So it's either going to be, assumingly, it's just going to be with the EX set, right?
Yeah, that's interesting too. I could have sworn that whenever the announcement was made, that it said that rotation was going to be in January. But when I went back and looked at it on the Pokemon website, it actually does say early next year, which I might just be remembering incorrectly. I'm curious if anyone listening remembers for sure. But like I, for some reason, have a memory that it said January. So I wonder if they've gone back and changed it to say early next year so that rotation would happen when Scarlet Violet base set comes out. Because it could have been kind of interesting if rotation happened in January before Scarlet Violet base set. You know, we lose the early Sword and Shield sets, and we're kind of playing just a abbreviated version of this format, or like a different version of this format because we're just losing a decent amount of cards. So I
Yeah.
don't know.
Would have been interesting. Yeah, maybe that's how I remember it too. But I think maybe that was just our assumption, was that it'd probably happen in
I guess that
January.
could be the case. Yeah.
But if anyone in the comment section remembers it, also them saying it was going to rotate in January, let us know in the comment section on the YouTube channel. Did it at one point, or did they make an announcement at some point saying that rotation was happening in January,
Because
or
if
has it always
rotation
been early
happened,
next year?
if it happened in January and then we don't get Scarlet and Violet base set until February,
Yeah,
there are several cards that like have almost always been in standard that would leave the standard format for about a month, like Switch and Switch and Energy
yep.
Retrieval. These are cards that have been out pretty much, they've pretty much been standard legal since Black and White base set. There might have been a format or two where one of these cards was maybe not legal, but for the most part, they've always been around. And
Hmm.
even in Japan, they've already gotten, because they got, I think it was in the Start Deck 100s. Someone commented on one of the YouTube videos for the podcast and said this whenever I said that there had not been um, a later than D regulation mark print of like Switch and Escape, or not Escape Rope, Switch and like Energy Retrieval and stuff like that. Said that in the Start Deck 100s, they actually did get updated regulation marks for those cards. So we haven't gotten those.
Oh, so maybe
Um,
we'll get them in Crown Zenith then. That might be when we get them.
that is possible, right? That is definitely possible.
Yeah, that would make sense then if we get them. Make sure we still have our Switch. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that card's always been in the. There's been was there a time when Switch wasn't legal? I feel like there was a
There
time, but it
has
was
to have
probably
been at
just.
some point, but
I
yeah,
think it was
Switch.
just in America. Like Japan, they probably always had Switch because like we had a period of time where we didn't have a bench barrier Pokemon, but Japan, when Japan's Mew rotated, they immediately got Manaphy. But we had a period of time where we
Is
didn't
that
have
true?
Manaphy.
Really?
Yeah, they immediately got Manaphy when Mew rotated, whereas we had a period of time before we got Manaphy where we didn't have Mew.
Interesting. Okay.
So
I don't know
yeah,
that
so I
those.
think
I
I
don't
think there
think that
was.
timeline lines up exactly. Is that? Are you sure about that? Did they have?
I'm pretty positive.
Okay,
Yeah,
because Manaphy just came out this year,
yeah, but it's at the beginning of the year.
and they were
They
still
rotated in
playing with Sun and Moon
January.
cards.
Well, they rotated in January, so they would have.
Okay,
That's when Mew rotated, and then they
and they weren't
got
playing Sword and Shield
Manaphy.
on yet. They were still playing with Sun and Moon cards at the start of
Yeah,
this
yeah,
year.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So and that's why it comes back to hopefully that because the game is built for Japan's format. It is not built for whenever our format is different from Japan. We're not playing the way
Yeah.
the Pokemon TCG is supposed to be played from the creators of the cards. They're creating it for the way they play it in Japan. So hopefully, like I said, like hopefully this late rotation from us is them syncing us up with Japan's card releases. So when they have their cards legal with whatever, like when they have their sets legal with other cards, we have the exact same thing, and then we rotate at the same time. When they would rotate, we would rotate. So hopefully that all syncs up eventually. But it kind of makes sense because the game is like supposed to be played the way they play it, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes when I feel like stuff is like overpowered in our formats, it shouldn't be and wouldn't be if we were playing the actual game the way it was supposed to be played, you know?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that TPCI does. Like the difference we talked about last week between the Pokemon Company and the Pokemon Company International is like
Yeah.
TPCI comes in and they try to get us the cards in like a correct order and manner. Like because Japan just gets so many more sets than us. They get like so many mini
Yeah.
sets. Like between their main expansions, they have so many mini sets and like collections and things like that. Products coming out not in sets as well, like with the Start Deck 100s, that we just don't have that happening. So that's one of the things they do is they decide, okay, these cards are coming out in Japan. We got to place them into our expansions in the right places, and then also like placing them in with the correct like regulation marks and all that stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah. We'll see.
Well, it is time, I think, Azul, for everyone's favorite segment of the podcast, Guess That Flavor Text, where every single week, Azul or I will pick a card, read the flavor text, and have the other host try to guess which Pokemon the other person is reading. We try to figure out what that flavor text is. Of course, um if you guess correctly, you get 4 points added to our scoreboard that we keep tally of. But there are 3 lifelines you can utilize. Each time you use a lifeline, you do lose the chance at one of those points, though. So if you use all 3 lifelines, you only get 1 point, which I think Azul and I pretty much always use all of our lifelines. But the lifelines, of course, are what set the card is from, what stage the card is, and read an attack name. It is Azul's turn to pick. I think we are tied at 4-4 because
Tied at 4.
you almost got it right last week, but switched at the last
so
second.
close. Oh my gosh.
But we're at 4-4 points. Ignore the fact that this is episode 34 and we are terrible at this. But it is Azul's turn. You got a card for me, man?
I do. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
The powder that covers its body regulates its temperature so it can live in any region or climate.
Okay. I think that this is definitely an ice type Pokemon is what I'm leaning towards. So like a water type in the TCG. My first thought was, I don't know if it's just because we were talking about this Pokemon on that Samurott card, but Snorunt is an ice type Pokemon. So that was one of the things I thought of. The other one, because you said something about regions, I do think about Alolan Vulpix. Because it is present in the Kanto region, but it's a different form in the Alola region. It's the Alolan form, so it uses the powder to adjust to the necessary climates of the different regions, I should say. And powder snow is, I think, a attack that Alolan Vulpix uses. And we do have the Alolan Vulpix VSTAR coming out in this set. So maybe it's a Pokemon that was been on Azul's mind. Can you read the flavor text for me one more time?
Yeah. The powder that covers its body regulates its temperature so it can live in any region or climate.
I don't know, man. I kind of just want to go for the 4-pointer. I'm not like that.
That's a pretty good analysis, to be honest. Like, it's a pretty good analysis of the.
See, now I think you're
text.
trying to get me to commit on something that's not the truth. So I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna use at least one lifeline.
All right, go ahead.
I'm gonna use at least one lifeline. I'm gonna go with what set the card is from, because I think I should be able to remember most of the Alolan Vulpixes.
I forget what set this is.
Oh my
I just
gosh.
like I have the symbol. Hold up.
Just look it up on PKMN cards. It'll tell you what the set is.
Oh, yeah, it's true. I think I found it though. Let me see. Is this right? Why is my?
Do you want? Maybe you just describe the set symbol. Maybe that instead of what set it's from, have the other guest describe.
Okay,
the
I got
set
it. I
symbol.
got it. I was right. It's Battle Styles. That's what I thought it was, but I just wanted to confirm.
Dang it! I think there's a regular Vulpix in Battle Styles. I don't think it's an Alolan Vulpix. Dang it! What stage is the card? I'm gonna probably need to use more lifelines.
It's a basic.
And I'm just going with all of them. I was confident. I know there has been an Alolan Vulpix this generation. Of course, we're getting the V-Star. But for some reason, I want to say there's a regular Vulpix in Battle Styles. I'm going to have you read an attack name. And if you say Powder Snow, I'm just going to cry.
It's Surprise Attack.
Surprise Attack? That doesn't sound like a Vulpix attack, to be honest.
No, not really.
Battle Styles. I'm just going to go. I don't know what else I could change to at this point. I'm going to go with Alolan Vulpix.
It is not Alolan Vulpix. It is Scatterbug.
Scatterbug? I was not ever getting that. Wait, did I not give you a Scatterbug? I gave you some other bug. Maybe Blipbug. No, you gave me a Blipbug. That's what it was.
Yeah, I guess I'm giving you all the bugs.
Scatterbug.
But yeah, Scatterbug, not Alolan Vulpix. Nice try, Chip. You'll maybe get him next time.
Probably not.
Yeah, I just like I knew there was like no way. I was like, either this is gonna be a 4-pointer or a 0-pointer. It's like either you've read this before, or just like new?
How is this ever a 4-pointer? Who even
Did you
remembers
just
that this?
know?
Who remembers that this Pokemon even exists, Azul?
The Scatterbug.
The
Yeah, is it gonna be a 4-pointer or a 0-pointer? Either you've already read this flavor text before for some reason, and you're just like, oh, that's Scatterbug, or
You
it's gonna be a 0-pointer.
Do you anticipate me just sitting in my room in my spare time and scrolling through reading flavor texts?
No, but you've opened packs, so like maybe you just opened the Battle Styles pack, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay,
Uh,
Scatterbug.
yeah, I did not get it this week, unfortunately. But let us know down in the comments. Maybe you were more fortunate than me. Did you also
No way
get
anyone
stuck
got
on
that one.
the? Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one. That is definitely a tough one.
No shot
Mm.
anyone got that.
I still think the hardest one that we've ever done was the Morgrim that I gave you like really early on. I just remember Joe Bernard, who we've had on the cast before. He listens to the podcast as well, and he was telling me, he told me at EUIC when I saw him that Morgrim was a vile pick. He's
Vile
like, who is gonna pick? Who is ever gonna remember that this Pokemon exists?
No one. Just same thing with Scatterbug. But yeah, moving on. Up next, we're going to talk about some Silver Tempest. So we haven't played much with the cards at all. I've done very little testing with the new set. I'm sure Chip hasn't done very much either, but we still got some thoughts on some of the cards. So we're going to talk about a couple of them today. Go ahead, Chip. Pick. What is your favorite card coming out of Silver Tempest,
My
and the ones that we
favorite.
kind of listed? Out of the ones we kind of made that list about. What is out of those? Which one are you most excited for?
I mean, I'm not gonna say Lugia because that's just like the cop out answer. Obviously, I think one that I'm definitely excited for. I'm just gonna scroll through real quick, make sure I don't miss anything. There's definitely a bunch that I want to try out, so I don't know what I'm most excited for. I definitely want to try out Chestnut V. I don't think it's like amazing, obviously, but it reminds me of the what's it called? Like the one solo Pokemon stall decks that have been popular before, like
Yeah.
The Stone Journers and the Drakazolts and all those things. Sorry, that's what I was was getting to. Now it's not like a solo Pokemon that you leave just one in play,
Yeah.
but you get 4 Chestnuts in play. Every time your opponent attacks into it, they take 12 damage counters. And you can give it a decent amount of HP. It's got 230. You can put the Cape of Toughness on it, boosted up to that 280 mark.
Yep.
And, you know,
Get a Cricket
there's
Tune in
a
play?
little bit of potential with the healing as well. The Radiant Serena that's coming out in this set could be an option to just heal 20 damage every single turn passively. I think this card is honestly pretty decent and could see play in some sort of tanky deck at some point. Maybe takes the place of Radiant Gardevoir in some decks as well. You know, I mean, I wonder if this is ever better than Radiant Gardevoir in certain things like that. But yeah, that I don't think that Chestnut's something I'm the most excited for, but it's definitely one I'm going to try out. I don't think it's amazing. 3 grass and a colorless for the attack requirements. We've got Gardenia's Vigor, which is a decent card that hasn't really ever had a place. So maybe give it a try with this. See if we can work something out. See if we can you know, make some people try to do weird things because they're scared of attacking into a Chestnut.
Yeah, the Chestnut. Actually, I didn't realize its ability worked that way. So now I'm actually a little bit more excited to give that one a shot for sure. I also never really knew what Chestnut looked like, and now that I look at this card, I have a better idea. But I wish I hadn't known. What
Chestnut's
is
a cool guy. I chose Chestnut when I played through X and Y. That was my starter.
That's a cool guy,
he's
right?
a cool guy. Come on, man. You know he's got
Looks kind of like a mole.
a spiky shell. That's kind of like his thing.
Yeah, so Chestnut, not the thing. But another card with a cool ability that I think this is the deck I'm most excited to try. It's probably the first deck I'll play when the set releases on PTCGO. Also, it needs very little, which will make it pretty easy to put together, is Radiant Jirachi. The Radiant Jirachi for 2 colorless energy. Flip a coin, or flip 2 coins. If both are heads, your opponent's Pokemon is knocked out. If either are tails, you do nothing. So you're going to combo that with Glimwood Tangle, of course. And we have had a Cleaver with the exact same attack before. But
there's so many cards in this set. I'm just trying to scroll down to the Jirachi. I'm just like constantly scrolling.
The ability on the Jirachi says when it gets KO'd, you search your deck for any 3 cards. So like you attach your Twin Energy to your Jirachi, you use the attack. Let's say you get double heads, you knock them out, they come up, they knock you out, and then you search your deck with its ability to get Rescue Carrier, twin energy +1 card. So you get +1 every single time. If they replace your Glimwood, you get that. The question is just what else are you going to play this with? Probably with Slowpoke, right? You'll probably play a Slowbro line to close out the game more consistently at the late game.
Yeah,
But there's like theoretically so much room in this deck you can literally play anything.
yeah,
But
maybe
the thing is
this
like
goes
what's so
with
cool
like
with it?
a Zoroark box type deck, right? Like
Yeah,
a
yeah, could
like
see that.
a Zoroark, Wormadam or something like that. And obviously that works great with Slowpoke. Yeah, I mean, it's the type of card. It's a one card inclusion because it's a Radiant Pokemon. You can only play one. You can chain it together constantly, like Azul said. And worst case scenario, you can just use its ability when it gets KO'd to go set something up, right? Even if you're not resetting this up, you can just set whatever else you want to do in your deck up, and your opponent can't disrupt it with something like Marnie. It does get disrupted by Path to the Peak, which is maybe a little bit of a bummer, but
Yeah.
um,
But even
but
then, if you're playing like B-Barrel or something, you could theoretically just draw back into the pieces for it and
yes.
then another Glimwood.
And if you ever get the 25% flip 2 coins, like you're gonna get pretty far ahead in a single prize deck like this. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's pretty cool as well. I'm gonna try it out at some point too. I think Zoroark probably is the thing that just makes the most sense with it though, as well.
Yeah, Zoroark, and then you can like play B barrels and Slowbro because the Slowbro at the end of the game when your opponent gets down to one prize card, instead of having to flip for your last two prize cards, or if they have a single prize Pokemon in the active, you just Slowbro to draw your last two with the Twilight Inspiration or whatever. So that'd probably be the combo to go with it for sure. But yeah, no, that's the one I'm probably most excited to try out.
Another one I'm interested to see if there's a spot for it is the Rapidash. Its ability is really strong, very reminiscent of the Volcanion EX, which was a meta deck for pretty much as long as it was in the format. You played a decent amount of Volcanion as well
Yeah.
whenever that was around, but its ability, Heat Boost. Once during your turn, you may discard a fire energy from your hand. If you do, until the end of your turn, the attacks of your fire Pokemon do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. And so this is only as good as the fire Pokemon that you have available in the format, right? One of the best ones being Radiant Charizard. So this plus a
Yep.
Heat Boost gets you to the 280. With a Choice Belt, now you're doing 310. So that's enough to knock out something like the Mew VMAX, which 310 was not a number you could hit before this. And it does stack, so you can use multiple Rapidash. The problem with it, though, is that it's a stage 1, so it's going to take a little bit longer to set up. The other fire Pokemon in the format, really not the best. The only other ones I could think of would be like Victini VMAX and Centiskorch VMAX. I guess this does synergize with Centiskorch, right? Because you discard energy and then get them back into play on
A
the
little bit.
Centiskorch. So there's
Yeah.
something there potentially.
I think
This
you're probably
could
looking at
be
combining it with I was gonna say Entei and
okay,
Baby
sure.
Moltres. I think you could maybe just make a deck that is just like 4/4 Rapidash, Radiant Charizard, and 4 Baby Moltres, and then that's it.
That's not doing enough. There's no way, bro.
Yeah, well, the Baby Moltres hits for 120.
No,
You
it
get the
doesn't.
boost. Well, how much does it hit for?
It's like 90. Yeah, it's 20 plus
Oh,
70 more if it has a damage counter on it.
wait, really?
Yeah, it's 90.
Oh, that's a little bit rough. Maybe it'd have to be an Entei build then. Maybe Entei is the way.
Yeah. I mean, Fire does have other support as well through the Magma Basin, and this synergizes well with Magma Basin, right? Because you discard an energy and
Yeah,
then can get it right back into play.
yeah.
The fact that it's a state, I mean, this would be insane if it was a basic. Let's just say
Oh, it'd be
that it
broken.
would be it's stupid good, so it has to
It'd
be
be
on
so
an
good.
evolution. But then the fact that you put it on an evolution just makes it,
Eh,
yeah. That's like the best react. Like it's really
yeah,
strong ability, but you just got to get multiple of them set up. You got to commit so much deck space to it as well. So we'll see.
yeah. Definitely a cool ability. One of the most overhyped cards, I feel like. Well, I guess initially because it was like one of the first cards leaked is the Vulpix V-Star. And I've still been seeing people talk about it still, but it was one of the first leaked cards from the set. So that makes sense. But I do overall think that the Vulpix is absolute garbage.
So
So
yeah,
it's
go
just
ahead.
squishy. 240 HP. You're doing 160 damage. It's just the numbers are just too low.
Yeah, so I think that the initial reaction to this card was due in large part to the decks that were really popular at the time, Palkia and Arceus. Palkia V-Star, Arceus V-Star both have abilities, and so if you attack into one of those decks with the Snow Mirage attack during your opponent's next turn, you prevent all damage done to this Pokemon from Pokemon with abilities. So at
Yep.
first glance, you're like, oh, this could be pretty solid. But then if you just think about it a little bit more, you'll realize, ooh, Palkia V-Star, it evolves from Palkia V, and Hydro Brick does 200 damage. And with a Choice Belt and a Zigzagoon, that's 240, which is enough to knock out a Alolan Vulpix.
Yeah.
Arceus VSTAR also has Arceus V, which doesn't have a basic. It's not doing quite as much damage, but it's getting that 2-hit KO. And
Also,
also,
Arceus generally plays Path to the Peak, so you shut off your
yes.
own ability.
Yeah. Yeah. If your opponent just puts Path to the Peak in play, they can attack you with their V-Star Pokemon. And obviously, this is just going to get totally run over by Mew VMAX. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe in the right meta that only had ability Pokemon that don't utilize basic Pokemon that have really strong attacks as well. Maybe there's a meta where Alola and Vulpix could exist and do decently. I think it's unlikely as long as it is legal at the same time as Palkia and Arceus, though. Or at least
Yeah.
Palkia, I guess, because Palkia is probably just one of these cards that's pretty much always going to be pretty good. Mew VMAX as well, one of those that's always going to be good. So, yeah, Vulpix, I don't think the stuff is there for it.
Yeah, I don't think it quite has enough going for it. Maybe one day. Very specific meta. It'll maybe get there eventually.
I do think its V-Star power is pretty good. You can use it for no energy, and it does 70 damage times the number of your opponent's Pokemon V in play. So maybe there is a world in a deck, like, we've seen several decks recently that have popped up that don't play a V-Star Pokemon. There's no reason to use a V-Star power, or no way to use a V-Star power, like a Vikavolt deck or something like that. Maybe you get a 1/1 Vulpix in there just for the ability to use Silver Snow Star, but the problem as well is the fact that those decks now are going to have access to the Forest Tablet card, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And I think that to have access to a V-Star power, that's a little bit easier than adding a 1/1 line. I do think this V-Star power is pretty decent, though.
Yeah, it's not terrible. We'll give it that. It's not terrible. Definitely some better options out there. And yeah, the tablets. I guess we can go to those next, right? The tablets coming out: Forest Tablet, Earthen Tablet. Forest Tablet allows
They're
you
not
to.
called that. I think everyone's just
Oh,
calling
that's what
them
people are
tablets
just calling them tablets. They're
because
called
that's
what?
what they
The
are, right?
Earthen. Yeah, they're called Earthen Sealstone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Forest Sealstone. And probably the one that'll have the higher impact in the initial release will be the Forest Sealstone, because it's you can put these on any of your V Pokemon and then use the attack or the ability on them. And the Forest one has an ability which says you can search your deck for any one card, and this does take up your V-Star power. So
Yeah,
when
it
you
is
attach
a
one of these
V-Star power,
stones,
yes.
yeah, it is a V-Star power. So it uses up your V-Star power. So if you use the V-Star power, you don't get to also use a Sealstone ability or attack. But the Forest Sealstone has the ability where you can search your deck for any one card. So a nerfed Starbirth from the Arceus, but when you're playing a deck that doesn't have a V-Star power but has V Pokemon in it, because once again, this has to be attached to a V Pokemon, all of a sudden you're searching your deck for any one card at any point in the game, which is pretty good. Unless you put it in play and it gets like vacuumed. And specifically, people are looking at this and like, oh, you can put this in Mew and it becomes an out to any card throughout the game. Or when you get Roxanne Path, it becomes an out to go find your out to Path and you're just back in the game, right? So seems pretty good in Mew for sure. We'll probably play in other decks as well.
Yeah, we talked about these two cards a little bit last week, so I don't want to go too in depth on them because we did talk about them already.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
one thing that we didn't talk about that I've started to see more lists from Japan now coming out of Fusion Strike Mew, which we talked about that last week as being a potential resurgence in the new meta once Lugia V-Star comes out. It does seem like a decent way for Mew to kind of counteract the damage reduction from the Lugia deck. Forest Sealstone obviously works, I think, best with Mew. And if Fusion Strike Mew is becoming more popular, that is a super combo heavy deck. And the fact that you can play this card to just guarantee a piece of the combo is super good. Whether it's guarantee the attach of a Fusion Strike energy for turn, whether it's the guarantee grab of the Alessa Sparkle. Most of the Japanese lists I've been seeing are only playing 2 Alessa Sparkle because that's all you need. Because you can just have so much easier access to it with this card. Of course, you still have access to Cramorant and things like that. And then when you're cutting things like the Alessa Sparkles, and you can cut down on some of these things because you're going to have this ability to use at some point, you can make more room for things like good old Pokemon catchers. So are we moving to a meta where we're going to see the catcher Mew pop back up once again?
We might, because it does seem like it is probably maybe has the better matchup against the Lugia deck. Just being fast and aggressive might be the only way you can out prize trade them. Because the Lugia deck is running stuff like Drapion or Crobat VMAX or even the Yveltal seems to be the mainstay of like 1-hit KO anything.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I definitely think we could get to a point where that's the build of Mew. The catcher Elsa Sparkle, unfortunately,
And I
but
really hope
Lugia pushes it to that.
and I hope it doesn't push us to the point where the optimal deck to play and the way to play it as well is to play Fusion Strike Mew and choose to go second. And choosing to go second because of how easy it is to pull off the turn one Melodious Echo with the power tablets, whatever you might need. So
Yeah, hopefully not. Hopefully we don't get pushed that far. That would be bad.
yeah, that's a line that's, I mean, we've been in that format before, right?
Yeah,
That format has existed. But something else
yeah.
I did want to note about these cards as well, which is just kind of like, this might not be that big of a deal to most people,
Oh
but
yeah,
something worth mentioning is that these cards are holo rares in the set. They're not uncommons, they're not regular rares. They are holo rares, which means they're going to have a little bit lower pull rate than uncommons, most trainers would normally. And they also don't come as reverse holos, which is really interesting. I saw that online that there won't be reverse holo prints of Forest Sealstone and Earthen Sealstone. So that's going to make these cards more expensive than they normally would, combined with the fact
yeah.
that they're playable, right? So the fact that they're a holo print, there's no reverse holo, and they are playable is going to boost the price of them. And there's just probably going to be less of them available on the market because there's no reverse holo prints of them, right? So
Yeah.
maybe we'll get non-holo prints of these in a deck at some point someday, but if you're needing to play with the card, that doesn't do you any good. You need to get it right now so you can utilize it for Brazil or any of the December tournaments, right?
Yeah, thankfully, it's only a one of
Sure.
in most decks. Like you only need to only be playing as a one of, so that's like the good thing, I guess. I guess like talking about Arceus and Lugia. I mean, there's not too much to say. Like once again, we talked about them last week. Probably going to be the new BDIF. I think that's kind of everyone's expectations for it, which I think is fine. It's fine to have a BDIF, but I just don't enjoy formats where the BDIF pushes kind of extremely warps the format around it. I think we've seen that with ADP, Mew, and even Palkia recently
Yeah,
have all
for
been
sure.
decks that have really forced the whole meta to revolve around it in an extremely, I think, unhealthy way. It's overall created unfun meta overall, I think, when you compare it to other formats. So, going to be powerful. Probably the BDIF. How good will it be? I guess we'll have to wait and see.
A lightning type Pokemon I wanted to talk about. There's a couple on here. One of them is the Raichu. So this is a little bit of a cheesy one because for a colorless attack, it does ambushing spark, 40 damage. And if your opponent has used their V-Star power during this game, this attack does 100 more damage. So 140 times 2, 280 damage. I think it's very obvious that these numbers were put together with the origin form Palkia V-Star in mind. Obviously, the boost of this damage is reliant on your opponent doing something. So this is the type of thing that if your opponent knows you have it, they can play around it. I do think Raichu could be an inclusion in like a Zoroark box deck. We talked about
Yep.
Zoroark box a little bit with the Radiant Jirachi. So if that's a deck, maybe you throw a Raichu in here just because I mean, that deck has no good way to KO an Origin Form Palkia V-Star as it is. Your opponent can obviously play around it, like I mentioned. The fact that it's colorless, though, and also I think that when I initially saw this card come out, people's reaction to it was like, "Oh, it's another Drapion V, another Galarian Zapdos V," and this is definitely just way worse than both of those
Yeah.
examples, because your opponent can directly and pretty reasonably play around it. Though I will say Palkia is a deck that pretty often when I've played it, there have been many times where I have no choice but to use my V-Star power. It's like I either use my V-Star power or I don't attack this turn.
Yeah.
So while they can play around it to an extent, it's maybe not that easy to do so.
Yeah, we'll have to we'll have to see if this is like the point where you finally Zoro Box becomes like a viable deck. I don't think so. I don't think Raichu's gonna save Zoro Box,
And I don't
especially
think
with how
you're ever
much.
playing like Pikachu Raichu in a deck, right? Like
Yeah, I don't
that's
think so.
we're never playing a 1/1
No.
or a 2/2 line of Raichu. Like this
Mhm.
card pretty much solely goes in Zoro Box, right?
Yeah, I feel like it for the most part. I can't imagine like adding it to I don't know, a 2/2 line to an Arceus deck or something seems pretty unreasonable. Although Arceus is probably more likely to force your opponent to use their V-Star power than a
Sure.
Zoro Box is. I don't think you're running a 2/2. Well, maybe you are. Maybe you are running a 2/2 Raichu. I don't, but Palkia is not that big of a threat anymore in the format, anyways.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a
Mhm.
decent amount of special energy hate in general with Lugia coming out, so that was kind of
This also
um,
does one shot Lugia for what it's
Zork.
worth as well.
That is true. It does one shot Lugia.
And
Oh, and they are.
Lugia has to use its V Star power, right?
That's true. Okay, okay. Maybe I didn't even actually think about that.
I
Maybe
didn't think
that
about
is
it till just
the
now, to be honest. I was still stuck on the the
maybe that's
Palkia
what everyone
path,
was
but
talking about when they were calling it Drapion. Maybe it is a hey, it could be pretty good.
Arceus Raichu for Brazil, Azul.
Now I gotta. Well, maybe Zorak Raichu. I don't know about Arceus Raichu, but maybe Zorak Raichu. Although Arceus Raichu, maybe.
He went from I don't know about that. Oh, but maybe.
You gotta KO the Dunsparce first. That's gonna
That
be
is
the
the issue, right?
yeah. Gotta get that Dunsparce first. But Starbirth, fine boss it up. Could work.
GG. And another lightning type Pokemon to talk about, the Regieleki VMAX. We did talk about this when it got revealed as well. It's got the free retreat, which is nice. You know, boosting the damage of
Yep.
lightning type Pokemon.
Basics
Is,
only though.
yeah, basics only is decent, but it's like about what you're able to pair it with. I guess Raikou V may be the best option.
Vikavolt.
Yeah, Vikavolt for the
I think
item
Vikavolt
lock.
would
Sure,
be.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't forget about that.
I don't know how good that's gonna be, but I think that is probably you can instead of playing like the baby Zapdos that increase your damage by 10, you put like a 2/2 Lecky VMAX in the Vikavolt deck, I think, and then plus 30 is like a lot for to be like going for item lock
Item
from
lock,
50 to
yeah.
what 80 is like a big buff, I think, if the deck is still as smooth, but still not like a huge game changer, I don't think.
And this does stack, right? So like we can, you can go to 80 and to
Yeah.
110 and to 140 potentially.
I don't think we're not setting up 3 Luckies. I
I
don't
don't
think we're
know,
setting up
man. I
3
mean,
Luckies.
why not? You know, if we're
No, I don't think it's
if,
gonna happen.
if we're going 2 hit KO and item lock into the meta, like that's pretty good. Throw some hammers in there. Everyone's
Okay.
having a great time.
Yeah, everyone's having a ton of fun with that.
And it's easy to set up with Earth and Seal Stone, right? Or Forest Seal Stone. Which one is it? Forest
Forest.
Seal.
Yeah, Forest. Forest is I mean, you could play the Earth and Steel some, but that sounds worse. So yeah, Forest. Yeah, that will add some consistency to the deck. Yeah, Vikavolt doesn't really have a V-Star power to utilize right now, so okay. I'm down.
We're down to Clown. Psychic type Pokemon Radiant Alakazam. This one is a pretty cool card, but I don't think that there's a great spread deck to make use of it right now. Its ability Spoonful of Pain. Once during your turn, you may move up to 2 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another one of their Pokemon. And its attack is really not that bad either. Mind Ruler for a Psychic and Colorless. 20 times the amount of cards in your opponent's hand. So you could theoretically, one hit KO something if someone maybe wasn't thinking about it, playing around it, anything like that. I don't know.
I like the ability. I almost like the ability a little bit more for just like theoretically, you could just have enough situations where you just like you over KO one Pokemon and then struggle to one hit KO the next Pokemon. So you could like, if you're hitting with Arceus is doing 180 damage. Yeah. You're doing 360. So you have like excess 80 to 40 damage. That if you could be like move that off and like start to build up damage on other Pokemon, it could lead to KOs all of a sudden, right?
Yeah, and especially if you're, not directly turn after turn to hit KOing a Pokemon. If you like hit for 180 and then go boss's orders, hit something else, and then now you've got a bunch of damage to move around potentially.
Yeah.
The problem is like this, you can only play 1 Radiant Pokemon per deck, right? So it's like this has to be more worth playing than Radiant Gardevoir, Radiant Greninja, Radiant Charizard. I think, those are the 3 best right now. And right now, Arceus decks are playing Gardevoir for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's a world where Radiant Alakazam does make more sense, especially if we're seeing Fusion Strike Mew come back, because Gardevoir is going to help way less into that version than the current DTE version of the deck.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I think it's a cool card with cool ability. And that's like the biggest thing that I want to see more of in these sets. We're getting these 200 card sets. And when there's only like 2 cool cards, it's like, okay, all right, I guess.
Sure.
But yeah, cards like this are just, it's cool to see more cards like this that are cool. And I think one of actually the best cards from the set that I haven't heard too much people talk about is the Jinx. So the Jinx has an ability that says if it's knocked out by a V Pokemon, your opponent doesn't draw any prize cards. And its attack for 2 colorless energy does 10 plus 10 more for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. This combos really well with any kind of deck that doesn't want to KO stuff, and then also plays Twin Energy or Double Turbo Energy. So I think Jinx with like some kind of Arceus deck would actually be pretty good, because Arceus really isn't one hit KO in anything. You're kind of just punching something and then punching it again. But when you could punch it with a Jinx with a DTE and then 2 hit KO it, and they can't draw a prize card if they KO the Jinx, that puts you in a pretty good spot, I feel like.
Or Zoroark Box.
Yeah, I guess you could put it. Yeah, put it as Zoroark Box.
Hey, it works with Wormadam, right?
Yeah,
it works with Wormadam.
Yeah,
it adds another Pokemon to the discard pile. You're going to be 2 hit KOing most of the time.
play Twin Energy
You
and Double Turbo
and
Energy.
double turbo. Yep. You know, we're
Yeah.
listen. This set just it's time. Zork box, right? This is it. We got the Raichu, the Jirachi, Jinx. Come on now.
I mean, if this isn't the time, rotation's about to hit, so then we're gonna start losing cards. We can't like we're gonna be like in a constant cycle of getting some new stuff for Zorobox and then losing stuff until Zoro just rotates and we'll never be get to the perfect
Yeah.
amount of so I feel like it's time has to be it's time feels like it has to be now for sure. But yeah,
I
the
mean,
Jinx
yeah,
I think
because
is
we're gonna lose
super
Twin
super
Energy
good.
to rotation, right? Unless we get something similar in the
Oh
Scarlet
yeah.
Violet base set. I mean, that's a
I
pretty
mean
important card.
EXs, double turbos have always been out when EXs are out, right? So I feel like maybe it's time to or not double turbo, double colorless energy.
That's not true. Not the
DCE.
original
Am I wrong?
EXs.
Oh, like 2016 or 2006?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And double colors actually, I don't think ever existed with lowercase EX Pokemon. Now that I think about it, because they weren't legal by the time it came out in Heart Gold to Silver base set.
Oh, I think you are right.
So probably, I think that we're past the point of seeing a double. I mean, I think with the fact that they printed both Twin Energy and Double Turbo Energy this generation, I think they recognize that double colorless energy is just a little too powerful of a card.
It has to have some kind of so they'll give us another they'll probably give us another double of energy with some kind of restriction,
Sure.
like the current
I think double
doubles.
turbo energy is like probably the best way to do it. Though I will
Yeah.
say, like, you know, minus 20 damage when these things have 300 hit points, it doesn't really
I
make
mean,
that big of a difference, right?
I guess the biggest thing that it's done is it stop. I mean, again, for Mew's math, it's pretty relevant, and also for Arceus's math, it's pretty relevant to like stop it from being able to just like KO a V turn 2. You have to work if you want to get that knockout. The choice belt goon plays and stuff. So I think it's done its job for sure.
Another V star to talk about, the unknown V star. Pretty
Well,
interesting
V stars. I
ability.
don't know if the V stars worth talking about, but the V is.
The V is okay, sure.
The V star, it has another of those ability, but the V is the cool one though. If you wanna read the V star, go for it. I'll put that on you.
I don't think the V is that cool. I'm kind of surprised that you are marking the unknown V as being a decent card. But yeah, it's got the
Well, I
victory
think
symbol attack for 3
yeah.
colorless. If you only have 1 prize card left when using this attack, you win. So I mean that effect is cool, but I mean I guess double turbo Raihan, is that what you're thinking with this?
Yeah, that's what it would have to be. It has to be the unknown V with a Raihan. She's playing a Raihan deck,
But
but
it's like this in order for this to be worth playing, it has to be winning you enough games where you wouldn't win by already being able to use Raihan plus
yeah,
double turbo in your
you have
turn,
to be
right?
playing a
Like
deck that you have to be playing a deck where you literally can't win the game. Where you literally can draw 5 prize cards. You have to be playing a deck that can like only draw 5 prize cards. But if it exists, then you got your unknown.
and then the V Star, I don't
It was
think
a
is
cool
great
attack.
either, but I mean, similar to like the Aerodactyl V Star, it's got like its V Star power is an attack that becomes a lasting effect on the game until it leaves play, which is interesting. But it's 3 colorless energy to make everything have psychic weakness, and then it has 250 HP, so it can be KO'd pretty
Yeah.
reasonably.
You have to
Yeah,
put in your active for a turn as well. So it's like it's going to the active to
yeah,
use the attack to get this ability.
yeah.
So it's gonna get hit, and then you go to the bench, and if it wasn't KO'd, they can just boss KO it, and then nothing has psychic weakness anymore. So
It is a Rats V though. I saw you were hype about that, right?
yeah,
RATSV
yeah.
or
I thought that was pretty funny.
VSTAR V Star. Okay. Anyway,
The next one to talk about, I think, would be Regidrago. We once again talked about Regidrago. Very versatile card, a lot of cool attacks, right? But we talked about it before. We talked about it last week or the week before. So not going to say
yeah,
too much more on
it's
it.
been a while since we talked about it. It was like
Has it?
after it got revealed. It's been a little while, I think. But yeah,
Well, maybe I'm wrong. I thought it was last week.
I've seen a decent amount of people talking about this card, and I've seen some people posting early lists online. I just don't think this card is ever going to be good, personally. Like you can, yes, copy a dragon attack from the discard pile, which is cool, but it has to be worth it. It has to be worth evolving into this Pokemon and committing to Gardenia as your supporter to get the acceleration to it. You also have to Gardenia to the benched one and draw the grass energies and find the fire energy in the right order. It's just, there's too much needing to happen here for this card, I think. I've seen some people posting with I saw a list with Arceus posted online. I've seen just like the Gardenia going. I think if there's a chance for this card, it's going to be through Arceus, most likely, just because it can ride on the back of Arceus V-Star being so good. I just don't see it. I don't know. You are a Mewtwo enjoyer, a Mewtwo a Mewtwo tag team, a Mewtwo Mew tag team. Obviously, you won a regionals with that deck. people are making those parallels. I think that this is just so much weaker, though.
Yeah, it's definitely not as good. Still a cool card. Uh, might be an okay tier 2, tier 3 deck. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, not a ridiculously strong card by any means. I don't think. I think it's okay. I think it's solid. But it probably won't be. It's not going to be Lugia. At first, I thought this was going to be the Lugia of the set, but then the more I've like seen Lugia's results and people talk about it and thinking about it myself, yeah, Lugia is the Lugia of this set. Regidrago is very much secondary and might not even be good enough to even be competitive, to be honest.
Yeah, to me, this set, it's like introducing a tier 1 deck and then some other interesting things, right? Which is really what most sets I feel like have done the last 2 years or so. It's like Palkia, tier 1 deck, and then we get, Dialga's kind of cool, right? Or Arceus
Yeah.
VSTAR. You can play anything with it. Everything else, it's like, okay. Mew VMAX, it's super, super strong. And then I don't even remember what else came out in Fusion
Nothing.
Strike. Like
There's
nothing.
nothing.
Yeah. I
Nothing.
was gonna say Jolteon, but that was like the set before, right? It was Evolving
Yeah, I think so.
Skies. Evolving, yeah, I don't know. That's just really kind of what it's been. Lost Origin was the exception, right? We got 5 or 6 really cool new decks, and it's made the meta feel really diverse. How are those decks going to stand up to Lugia, I guess, is the main question.
I think we're going back to a more narrow format with the release of, which is what we've had for a while. I feel like we had a pretty narrow format until the Lost Origin release, Lost Origin set, and then we're gonna go back to that more narrow feel. Once Lugia comes out, unfortunately.
Another trainer to talk about, Leafy Camo Poncho. What a name, by the way. It's a Pokemon tool card. If the Pokemon this card is attached to is a Pokemon V-Star or V-Max, whenever your opponent plays a supporter card from their hand, prevent all effects of that card done to this Pokemon. So this will prevent Boss's Orders or Serena from pulling your Pokemon up to win the game. It's really hard, I think, to justify committing a deck spot to something like this in like a normal attacking deck, though we did see, once again, we've talked about him a couple times on the cast already this episode. Sander made use of a similar card, the Sun and Moon Badge, at EUIC on his Umbreon VMAX stall deck with Cheryl's and Eldegoss and all that stuff going on. So now you're not committed into just having a protection on a Umbreon or Espeon VMAX. You can have protection on any of your VMAXs or V-Stars.
Yeah, and it does. That is actually interesting. Maybe that deck is all of a sudden like super viable because you could put it on any. You could put it on any Pokemon, right? So anything with free retreat, that's a big Pokemon that can't be one KO. Just put it on that, and then you're cruising.
Yeah,
Cheryl, you just like switch between them.
Yep.
Yeah, Cheryl, Eldegoss, Loop. Yeah, I guess the new Reggie Lucky, right? It's got free retreat.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of HP. Yveltal still one hit KOs it, so that is a fear. I fear, but you can somehow beat that or just take the L to Lugia. That it works. It works for sure. So yeah, that's actually pretty cool. I was thinking like you can do some other kind of like attacking healing decks, where you just like set up a bunch of VMAXs. Play the new Serena, Radiant Serena, so that heals. You like retreat between them. As you retreat, you heal. Something with Crystal
like
Cave, maybe.
Healing 20 damage just isn't what it was.
No, but like you get that,
man.
but when you can't get gusted, I'm thinking back to like Mega Manetric, where you set up like 3 Mega Manetrics, and they hit one, you retreat it, you rough seas, you set up another, you attack, they hit it, you retreat to the third one, you send that one up,
yeah,
rough seas again.
So you've healed 60 damage from a
attack. Crystal Cave.
Okay.
Get Crystal Cave involved, maybe. So I'm just saying, this ideas. I got these ideas. But I think it is like a
free
powerful
retreat
card,
dragon or metal Pokemon that can utilize this.
Maybe got to get some. Well, it's time for like those stage 1 Pokemon that would reduce the retreat cost of your Pokemon by 2.
Oh, this deck sounds awesome, dude. This is gonna be such a good deck for sure.
Oh,
for sure.
Corviknight. As for your retreat cost.
All right, sure. Okay, Corviknight's the guy, right? Corviknight's the guy.
That's the guy. Catch me playing some Corviknight.
And then
Corviknight Poncho deck.
Yeah, Corviknight Poncho, right? Yeah, there you go.
All right, lock it in. A couple more to talk about. Serena, we talked about this one recently as well, but we'll go over it. New supporter card, probably I think the second most powerful card coming out of the set, right? I think it goes Lugia, Serena, and you can rank the rest under that. But Serena, you can discard up to 3 cards from your hand. You must discard at least 1, and then you draw up to 5 cards, or you can choose to gust up one of your opponent's benched V, specifically V Pokemon. So usually when you play boss's orders, you're bringing up a V Pokemon. You're sometimes bringing up some of the one prize Pokemon, but usually you're bringing up a V Pokemon. And if all your bosses could double as a draw supporter when you need it, even if it's not as good as Martial Research, that's pretty good, right, Chip?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think that at first many people just thought this would replace boss, but I don't think it can totally replace boss
I don't think so.
because sometimes you're going to KO a one prizer, and then if you're only playing Serena, your opponent can abuse that and just you're immediately forced into the 7 prize game.
And another buff for Zoroark box is people cutting boss, so they're not chasing your Zorua. It just gets better and better.
Zoro, I think if there's anything to take away from this cast, and maybe this is the episode title, Azul, Zoro box is broken. Is it Zoro box's time?
It'll never get better than this. Like, this is it.
this is its one shot. But yeah, I mean, I think Serena's a great card, obviously, but I don't think it replaces boss. I think you got to play a mix, or and this is interesting because like I remember this discussion also happening when Guzma came out. People were like, Guzma or Lysander, which one are we playing? Are we playing a split? And most people just ended up playing Guzma. Right?
Yeah.
But for a while, people played a split.
Yeah.
Sometimes, right? But it became evident
so much
very
better,
quickly that Guzma was just better. I don't think that we're gonna see the same thing here, though, where like people come to the conclusion that Serena or boss is just better. And it also is worth noting that Serena's longevity is going to be much lower than boss because it only brings up Pokemon V, can't bring up Pokemon EX. So when Pokemon EX come out and start being good, Serena is going to die down in popularity for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll see a little bit of a drawback there. But I actually kind of am hoping that Pokemon EX don't start to become good until we're like a rotation in, even maybe, to be honest, personally. I think that means
you hope that they make them to the point where it's like they're not good enough until.
Yeah, because that means they would have brought the power level down a little bit, and it's
back,
like, okay, we're scaling it back. EXs are going to
see. They're
suck
not going
for
to
a
do that because
year.
then they sell
Yeah,
no
but
cards. They can't.
yeah, that's
do
what I
that.
think though. They're not going to do that. Which I don't know, but maybe they just find the right balance where they can compete. But then once we get to an EX only kind of format, it feels really good still.
And they kind of did that with Pokemon VSTAR. VSTAR was scaling it back, right, from 3 prizes to 2 prizes.
Well,
but
I don't know if that means it's always carrying. Like something could be worth 1 prize card but have 1,000 HP, right? Like,
Sure.
like I don't know if that's scaling back the power level always. Because like if these 2 prize Pokemon are pushing out the 3 prize Pokemon, isn't that an indication of higher power creep? Or is it just like, I mean, I guess like you could make them, you could make these 2 prize Pokemon have 400 HP, so they completely decimate the 3 prize Pokemon. But now games are longer because they are 2 prize Pokemon, which I guess is a fair, analysis of the situation.
And last card I think we wrote down to talk about was the V Guard Energy. We did talk about this again last week. Very great card with the Lugia. The Pokemon this card is attached to takes 30 less damage from the attacks of your opponent's Pokemon V. I do think it's great in Lugia, but it does make sense in other decks as well. Talked about, like, I don't know, Stonejourner earlier on in the cast. We kind of mentioned that, if Stonejourner could have a 5th Stone Fighting Energy, this is pretty good, right? It's a little bit better even, so.
I could even see like an Arceus build where you scale it back to like 2 double turbo and like find that off your Starbirth and then play like 4 V-Guard energy. So those becomes your attachments for turn to make your Arceus. I mean, you get a big charm on there, you get a V-Guard energy on there.
The Radiant
nothing's
Gardevoir.
taking you down. Radiant Gardevoir, yeah, like nothing's taking you down, right? Like, so I could see something like that as well. Or some other kind of decks being built around V-Guard energy. Because yeah, reduce 30 damage to avoid 1-hit KOs pretty much entirely. It's a pretty big deal, to be honest. Like that's pretty nice.
Maybe this is a tech in like Fusion Strike Mew as well, right? Because you can Alessa Sparkle to your Mew VMAX and then attach this. So you're forcing in the mirror match, you're forcing them to have another modifier, right?
Yeah,
I don't think they're ever getting there with Oricorio and V-Guard energy. Like, that's just not happening.
I don't think so. No, you're pretty tanky at that point. Yeah, that could be the new way to play. Chip, why'd you have to do another way to play Mew? Do we really need this tank Mew? What?
Am I leaking, bro? I'm sorry.
Literally, Chip ruined the format right there. No one was going to build tank Mew. It's the new BDIF, and now everyone knows about it, and the format's ruined.
Oh,
you're going to be fine.
Bro, we're just the friggin' Poncho card.
Poncho on tank,
leafy
Poncho
camo,
Mew?
leafy camo.
I think Poncho and Mew. I think Poncho and Mew is definitely good as like a one-of because then you can set up 3 Mew VMAXs, and when you ever hit a board state where your opponent has to chase a Mew VMAX, you just Poncho it and then run it away.
Yeah,
So like you send it up, it hits, they take a hit. Yep. I think a one of Poncho and Mew is just like makes sense because it just works. It works well with free retreat Pokemon. So
Bro, it's hard to not play Choice Belt though on that Mew. That's the problem. Anytime I see someone with like the Heroes Medal and stuff as well, because it's like then you're just now not gonna get there on one of your attacks.
I mean, maybe, but I think it's probably worth the one of spot. Just be a little bit better placing with your tools, or play a safety vacuum or something, and be like, choice belt now, Poncho later. You know what I'm
Choice Belt now, Poncho later. Sure.
saying?
All right. Well, that is our kind of all the cards that we um identified as like the best options or like the things that we're most excited about maybe from the new set. There's definitely plenty of other interesting cards here as well though. Um so, we'll try out some other things, and after the set comes out this week, maybe we'll spend some time next week after we talk about the Warsaw results. We'll talk a little bit about early thoughts on what we've been enjoying whenever we
Yeah.
actually get our hands on the new set. So,
Potential surprises, hopefully, of
yes,
Zorobox, BDAF.
I think that's gonna, yeah, Zorobox, right? If there's anything to take away from this episode, Mew and Zorobox are broken.
Yeah.
Who cares about anything we talked about for Warsaw, right? All right, guys. Well, thank you so much to everyone for tuning in to this week's episode of Uncommon Energy. We really appreciate the support as always. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcasting platform. It really does help out a ton. And also be sure to subscribe over on the YouTube channel. We're still sitting around about like 50% of the people who watch the episode are subscribed. So if you made it to this point, you're listening every single week, just click the subscribe button. It helps out. And yeah, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out the socials as well. You can follow the podcast at uncommon_energy over on Twitter. You can also follow myself and Azul. Azul is at AzulGG, and I am at Trainer. Oh, no, sorry. I am at Chip Ritchie, no longer at Trainer Chip.
And I'm also at Azul_GG. So
You
Chip's
know what?
messing all of them up today.
It's all good. We're at the
Yeah.
end of the podcast. Who even made it to this point, right?
Yeah, catch us on the Twitters. Thanks for the support as always. Let us know how you're doing in the Guess That Flavor text in the comment section down below. And did we miss any of cards that you think were worth talking about from the new set release? Also, let us know about those. What's your favorite deck to try out coming out of Silver Tempest? And we'll catch y'all next week at 7 a.m. Eastern. Peace.
On Tuesday.
At Tuesday.